The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its host, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss the murder in your family on this podcast, please be sure to visit themurderinmyfamily.com for more information. You can support this podcast by visiting patreon.com/themurderinmyfamily. This episode may contain unsettling material or subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
Thank you for joining me for episode 39 of The Murder in My Family. If you find that you enjoy this podcast, please take a minute to rate and review it wherever you listen to your podcast so that the show can continue to grow and reach new listeners. To learn more about the show or the cases we discuss, please visit themurderinmyfamily.com. You can also find us on Twitter with the handle @MurderInMyFam or by searching for the Murder in My Family podcast on Facebook. If you'd like to support this show through a Patreon donation, it's always appreciated. And you can do so by visiting patreon.com/themurderinmyfamily. Benefits of supporting the show on Patreon include early access to ad-free episodes of the show, plus bonus content not heard in regular episodes. Support may also include thank you cards, stickers, and more. If you prefer to, you can also support the show through a PayPal donation by visiting paypal.me/themurderinmyfamily. In each episode, I'll give shout-outs to any new supporters. In this episode, I'd like to thank Catherine Haynes, and thank you to all the supporters that generously donate to help keep the show growing and improving. Thank you, and now on with the show. This episode deals with both drug and alcohol addiction. If you need help with either, there is hope. You can contact Narcotics Anonymous at na.org and Alcoholics Anonymous at aa.org. Megan Beth Johns was born in Tallahassee, Florida on January 29, 1965, to her parents, Dr. Donnell and Rosemary Johns. Dr. Donnell Johns was a well-respected and internationally renowned speech pathologist who specialized in cleft palates, and his work in that field brought the Johns family to different locations before they finally settled in the Dallas, Texas area. Despite the perceived stability in the Johns family home, life there wasn't perfect, and it's alleged that Dr. Johns fought demons related to alcoholism. In 1978, Dr. Johns and Rosemary divorced, and the family breakup was tough on Megan and her brother Brian. During that time in the early 1980s, Brian became involved in some illegal activities related to his substance abuse, things like theft and burglary, and he wound up spending time in prison for his actions. By 1981, Dr. Johns had remarried, and around this time, Megan's mom, Rosemary, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and in 1982, she passed away. This was a volatile time for Megan. Megan and Brian both found themselves battling the demons of addiction. As Brian drifted off on his own, the bond between brother and sister that had always been close eroded. This was a tipping point perhaps for Megan. Her brother was in jail, her mom, who she had remained very close with, had passed away, and her father had started a new chapter in his life. It's possible that Megan was lonely during this time, and perhaps turned to drugs for some kind of comfort. The tall, beautiful blonde Megan, who a friend described as model material, began to deteriorate. Cocaine became a regular thing for the once bubbly and energetic Megan. Although things were never quite the same between Megan and her dad following the divorce of her parents, Megan was excited to find out that her father and his new wife were going to have a baby. In 1985, her half-sister Bridget was born. Megan was 20 years older than her little sister, but despite that age difference, the thought of having a little sister made her happy. As Bridget got older, she looked forward to activities with her older sister, things like doing crafting together. But Bridget began to ask herself questions, in particular why she wasn't allowed to go over to her older sister's home and spend the night there. Of course, Bridget didn't know at the time, but since Megan had slid into addiction, it made it hard for Megan's dad and stepmother to fully trust her around her younger sister. Megan wandered through the 1980s aimlessly, but she was tired of her life and the way it was going, and she wanted something different, a fresh start. It was hard, but she told herself that she needed help with her addiction. By the end of that tumultuous decade, Megan made the decision to start going to Narcotics Anonymous. And wanting to help other young people that were wrestling with issues of their own, Megan volunteered at a Dallas area shelter that specialized in helping endangered young people and runaways. By the start of the 1990s, Megan was making great strides and challenged herself to get a good job. She landed a job working as a secretary at the brokerage firm Smith Barney. Things seemed to really be looking up for Megan, and she seemed to be on the right path. Her job allowed her to get and keep a nice apartment. But the universe has a way of throwing obstacles at you and test you from time to time. And the same was true with Megan. While living in her Dallas apartment, she was sexually assaulted. Later, she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and was forced to have a difficult surgery to remove it. But through all of that, Megan persevered and came through it all. She got a new apartment in Irving, Texas. While Megan continued to try and keep her life on the right path, she was drawn towards people who were still struggling in their lives, and she wanted to help them. This went on through the 1990s and into the fall of 1994, when Megan was celebrating 5 years of sobriety. On Wednesday, October 5th, 1994, Megan failed to show up for work. It was highly unusual for Megan to call out of work, let alone to not show up at all. Concerned, her employer called the apartment manager at Megan's complex and asked him to check on Megan. The manager went to her apartment and found it locked. He went around to her sliding glass door, but it too was locked. With the assistance of another complex employee, the pair successfully jimmied the sliding glass door and gained entry into Megan's apartment. As they pulled back the curtains to step inside the apartment, they were met with a horrible scene. Megan was lying face down on the living room floor, and there was blood everywhere. They immediately called police. When detectives arrived, they found Megan to be wearing the nightgown she slept in. It was apparent that Megan was killed the night before. She had been stabbed at least 10 times with a sharp knife, and had wounds to her head and neck, and defensive wounds on her hands. She also had been struck with a blunt object. With no signs of forced entry, police wondered if someone close to Megan had killed her, maybe someone with a key. It appeared that the apartment had been ransacked, and some items were missing, including jewelry and a VCR. The key clue found by police was a bloody palm print that they couldn't identify. It was thought to have been left by a man based on the size of the print. Police couldn't find a motive for Megan's murder. They investigated employees at the apartment complex, as well as Megan's co-workers. And of course, police looked at Megan's family, including her own father and her brother. None of the people that police investigated were found to be a match for the palm print found in Megan's apartment. Police were left to wonder if some down-on-their-luck person that had trouble and needed help took advantage of Megan's trust and goodwill and wound up murdering her. When Megan was murdered, her brother Brian, who had been out of prison for a year, was working at a steakhouse in Austin, Texas. Brian was at his job when he got the call and found out that his little sister was murdered. The news devastated him. Decades later, in the wake of the police investigation and accusations by some people along the way, Brian is still hurt that anyone would ever suspect him of his sister's murder. Dr. Donnell Johns died in 2002 from complications following surgery. He never found out who murdered his oldest daughter. Years later, Bridget Johns, curious to know what was happening in her older sister's case, reached out to police. Since then, armed with details and reports, she hasn't stopped digging into Megan's murder. While Brian Johns and his half-sister Bridget have never been especially close, they do share fond memories of the sister that they lost. And while they were different ages and saw the aftermath of Megan's murder through different lenses, their goal is a common one. That's to not let Megan's case be forgotten and to find out the truth. Both Brian and Bridget are very candid and open about their personal demons involving addiction. Brian has stayed clean and out of trouble, and has turned to faith to help him on his journey. Bridget tackled and got ahead of her battle with alcohol, and recognizes the importance of acknowledging her battle. Both Brian and Bridget joined me separately to discuss her sister Megan's murder, a murder that's coming up on being unsolved for 25 years, and you'll hear from each of them in just a couple moments.
Mike, again, I'm Pastor Francisco, and we were with Brian during the last interview he had with someone else several months ago. And my wife usually sits in with us during this. We've known Brian for some time.
Mm-hmm.
We consider Brian our next of kin here at the church.
Okay.
So she'll be joining us in just a second.
And I hope you don't mind Pastor and his wife, but, I tend to sometimes start cursing, and I know I'm not going to curse in front of the pastor.
No problem. Whatever you're comfortable with.
It's a bad memory, and I've been known to say a wrong word or two, and I want to try my best not to say it in front of Pastor Francisco.
Was Megan your older sister or your younger sister?
She was approximately 4.5 years younger than me.
And can you share with us a little bit about your time growing up? Were you close? Did you do a lot of stuff together?
Me and my sister were very, very close, and we always did, kid stuff together. Just played and stuff like that.
And are you from Texas your entire life?
No, actually, my parents are from Ohio, and I was born in Ohio, and then my dad went to school in Tallahassee, Florida, at FSU, and my sister was born in Tallahassee, and we lived in Minnesota and upstate New York, and then we ended up in Texas when I was about 10 or 11 years old. And
your father was a little bit of a well-known person. He had done some pretty good work in the medical field. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And was that kind of moving around? Was that any kind of pressure on your family, having to go different places like that?
I mean, we had to leave my favorite dogs in Florida. That bugged me.
And
but besides that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I was going to say, and how did Megan handle it? Was she okay with it?
I mean, yeah, Megan is a pretty popular girl, and when she came to Texas, she made a lot of friends, and she handled it pretty good. And
was she pretty outgoing?
Yeah, my sister was, she had her time with the battle with drugs, because when we grew up, there was a lot of drugs. But she got clean and started attending Narcotics Anonymous, and she had 5 years clean, and she was working on herself, and she was the sweetest person in the world, and I don't understand why anybody would even do anything to her, because she didn't bother anybody. She was the nicest person in the world.
And you mentioned that battle that so many people have with drugs and alcohol and stuff. How long was that something that she was battling?
I think she started messing around when she was really young. She started smoking grass when she was young, and then she started doing hard drugs, and then she got clean and had 5 years clean, and had a good job and was doing really good, and I was real proud of her.
And it seemed like she had really turned a corner and turned her life around?
Exactly.
And if you could tell us, what kind of person was she was she, we mentioned her having some friends and being a little bit outgoing, but was she the kind of person that was very trusting and open to people?
Exactly. I think that's probably what happened. I'm not even sure. She was the nicest person in the world. She was the closest person in the world to me. And I just I can't believe what happened. I'm getting distracted by thinking about what you asked me and what I started thinking about her. Sorry.
No, that's understandable. No problem. And when 1994, the year that she died, were you close with her at that time? Were you in the same area? Did you keep in touch?
Yeah, well, I've been in Austin since 1993, and she had invited me up in maybe like the summer of '94, and me and my ex-girlfriend went up there, and we hung out with her and hung out with my dad, and it felt so great because I had my trouble with the justice system in the past, and I've gotten over that, you know. But it felt so good to be reunited with her, and we went and we looked at a bunch of old family pictures, you know. And yeah, then when I came back to Austin, Texas, and my dad called me one night and told me what had happened, I was like, whoa, I couldn't believe it.
Not the kind of thing you would ever imagining happened to Megan.
Of course not. Of course not. I mean, it just. I was at work. I was working as a cook at this place over there at West Austin, which is kind of the high class part of town, and flipping steaks, you know. And I got the call, and the chef called me back there and said, "You got to talk to your dad. Go in the bathroom." And I was like, "Why should I go in the bathroom?" I'm thinking. And then when my dad told me, I was like, "Whoa!" I couldn't believe it.
That must have been devastating for you.
Oh yeah.
And when you were with her during that time frame when you had gone down there and looked through photos as a family and stuff, did she express that she was afraid of anyone or had any issues with people?
Yes, sir. She told me she was being stalked, and she thought it was her ex-boyfriend. And I told her, I said, "Look, Megan, you know, I'm 3 hours down south. You know, I'm not going to be able to just run over here real quick if something's going on. I don't know what to say. You know, I can't just up and move up here to Dallas, you know, or Irving, because I'm in Austin." And when she told me she was being stalked, and I talked to my dad about it, and he was like, "Yeah, that's what she told me too. Some guy was stalking her." And I talked to Kelly Chance, and she told me that she was messing with this stockbroker guy because she was the secretary at a brokerage firm, but the guy was married, and you know she didn't want to see him because he was still married. You know, even when she didn't want to be his. I just found out about all this stuff yesterday. You know, a lot of stuff that she was telling me that I've been down here in Austin. I didn't know what was going on in her life. You know, besides when I briefly went to go visit her, because we didn't talk that much on the phone, you know.
So she had her job at the stockbroker place as a secretary, but according to what you've been told, she may have gotten involved with somebody that worked there?
Yes, and you know, there's some other things that I heard when I went up to the memorial service and the funeral. I even got in trouble because I didn't go back when I was supposed to. My boss was like, "Hey, you're supposed to be at work." And I'm like, "Hey, man, I'm staying for the funeral. I'm sorry, but do what you got to do." Yeah. But anyway, there was an old friend of hers, family friend. It's a friend of my dad's also, and his daughter and my sister were like the best of friends when they both got strung out on heroin. And she, as far as I know, is still on methadone. She's under the witness protection program because of some other murders that she was involved with. And she, when I was at the memorial service, went outside and smoked a cigarette with her. And she says, "I know who did it." And, you know, Mike, when she told me that, you know, it's like, I had to run. I had to just leave. I couldn't deal with it. No. Sorry. I couldn't deal with it anymore. I just came back to Austin because it was too much.
Yeah. I mean, this is your younger sister you're talking about, understandably.
Yeah.
And did she give you a name, or she just told you that she knew?
She told me this guy named Bruce. And I kicked some last names around, and she just kind of gave me a look because I knew this guy, but he got into the dope real heavy too. You know, but see, I mentioned all this stuff to Deanna Boyd, and she's just saying that's just all hearsay stuff, you know. But this is what this girl told me, and I tried to contact her on Facebook. And I think because she's in the witness protection program, that thank you, I'm sorry, that nobody can talk to her. I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know what's going on with that.
Did you go to the police about any of that stuff? Have the police ever talked with you?
I tell you, Mike, I was really, really upset when I got called up there and they put me on a polygraph test, and I was like, "Are you serious?" You know, I took it real personal, and I didn't want to have anything to do with them. It was the whole scenario. I had to get out of there. I just had to leave. I just ran. I assumed, since they were allegedly best friends, that she would say something, but she was too caught up in her drug, and I think she's still on methadone to this day.
You and I talked a little bit before. You told me, and you just touched on it just now, about the polygraph. You felt there was some suspicion on you. Tell us a little bit about that and how that felt to have any kind of suspicion on you as her brother.
I felt insulted. You know, I said, "This is my sister, man. Are y'all nuts?" You know? But then I talked to some people recently because, you know, I just recently reconnected with all my old high school buddies because Megan told me they're all still doing dope. You know, I can mess up on my own. I don't need to get up there and start messing with them, you know, and screw my life up with them, you know. So I left them all alone until recently. And I really felt insulted, you know, and they say that, you know, when I was up there that, I don't know, my DNA is in the house or whatever. It happened, you know, right, not too long after I went up to go visit her, you know, and I was like, well, we looked at some pictures, you know, but you know, that's my sister, man. Are y'all crazy? And it really bugged me. It really bothered me. But like I was saying, they said it was, some of my friends said that's protocol. That's what they do. But I just took it personal. I didn't know that. Not at the time.
Yeah, and a lot of times when someone's murdered, they look at the people that are related to them or as close to them and work their way out from there. So that is normal. But to your point, it probably didn't make you feel good that they talked to you or treated like you were a suspect.
Oh, man, I felt like, what's going on? You know, are y'all serious?
And did that cause any rifts or friction between you and the rest of your family?
Oh, we don't speak. They don't talk to me. I've tried to contact them. I've gotten a hold of all the high school buddies, but none of my family that want to have. Since that happened, you know, I even got a bad rap from my dad. My dad's current wife, when he passed away, she's trying to tell the reporter from Deanna Boyd from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram that I was an abusive child. I was violent, that I killed the family pet and I beat my mother. And that is all a bald-faced lie. And that really hurt when the lady, you know, texted me this stuff on Messenger. I didn't talk to her. And I was like, you need to talk to my half-sister, Bridget John's mother, Carol Johns, because she knows me. I live with her, and I am not like that, and I was never like that. I'm a pretty gentle guy. You can ask my pastor and my pastor wife. I might be a big guy, but I'm laid back. You know, I've worked through all that in the past. You know, at one time maybe I had been a little bit like that. You know, before all this mess, you know, happened. But you know, you change. I also go to Narcotics Anonymous, and I'm also clean, and I have no desire to use.
Congratulations.
Life is, yeah, thank you. Life is way better because you're in living hell when you're messing with that stuff, and I feel very serene, clean and serene, as they say.
Yeah. Going back, your sister had beaten her demons, it seemed like, and she was on the right path. Does it hurt? Does it make you sad that she never got to experience the rest of her life being clean and having a career and all that stuff?
Well, yes, of course, you know. And the thing that really bothered me is I got some misinformation from my dad, because my dad told me she had relapsed and it was drug related, and they're probably going to write it off as a drug related case. And I talked to everybody, and they said, no way, she was clean, you know. And so I wasn't in contact with these people until recently, and they said when they did the autopsy, she had no drugs in her system. So I don't know why my dad told me all this mess.
And then you're just trying to find out what the truth is, and meanwhile you're getting things told to you that aren't correct. Right.
You know, I even told my dad, I said, well, Dad, I might be going to the Irving County Jail. And he's like, what are you talking about? I said, well, if they catch this guy, I'm going to try to go in after him. And he's like, you better not. And I was like, bullshit. Sorry.
It's only natural to want to get the person that did this to your sister, so I don't think anyone can fault you for thinking that.
Right. Thank you.
And I can hear in your voice how sad this still makes you after all these years. What keeps you going? What keeps you wanting to talk about your sister's case and to get it out there so people hear about it?
Well, I mean, I didn't even know they had this Justice for Megan Beth John's Facebook page, because they were telling me that they still considered me a suspect, or I had something to do with this. And like I say, my family won't talk to me. And after talking to some good old friends of Megan that I knew when I was younger, and talking to this one lady, they in their mind, they have exonerated me, but I'm like, wow, I can't even believe people even think that, even having anything to do with my sister's death, There was some money involved. My sister left me with a $7,250 split three ways insurance policy. And I sent $2,500 to my dad for the headstone. I didn't care about that money. I'll make my own money, I make my own living. I don't care about money,
So it's not like you profited from it, like there was a big insurance policy that if she passed away, you got.
Exactly, and, I spent that up. I'll be honest with you. I was using it at that time, and I spent it up so fast.
Yeah. Yeah. And in a life insurance policy, that's not that huge amount anyways.
Right.
So, there's been cases where there's a motive of, this person had $1 million life insurance policy and maybe so-and-so killed them to get it. But, for that little bit of money, it doesn't seem like that could even be the case here.
That it's insane, it was split with my son and my half sister, Bridget Johns. And, Bridget, I just recently, like right before we did this podcast, she started messaging me on Messenger, and we talked about a lot of stuff, and she feels like, she's a black sheep of the family too. And she told me that she reopened the case, and that she got the autopsy report, and she got pictures, and and the way my father told me that my sister was murdered, it really, it was bad, and she says, you don't want to see the pictures? And I said, no, I really don't. And she acted like she wanted to reconnect to me. This is my half sister, I don't even know her, she's 30 years younger than me, Anyway, my son and my half sister got a third of the money that my sister left.
Your father never got to know the answer in the case because he passed away too, correct?
He was like 01, 02, 03, he had a heart attack.
What would you like Megan's legacy to be? She's been gone so long, but in your heart, it sounds like she's still there, and you think about her. What would you like her legacy to be?
She was like the kindest person in the world, and she was my best friend in the world too, and she was the nicest person in the world, and she would do anything for anybody, that's just how she was.
And it's a real shame that it sounded like she had everything turned around and her life in front of her, and then this happened.
Yeah, I could not believe it. I couldn't.
We talked a little bit before we started recording about the police investigation that's going on currently, and you were saying that you didn't think there actually was one open. Is that correct?
As of now, no, there is not. I just recently talked to Deanna Boyd, and I said, well, what's going on with her case? And She told me it's closed case. Nobody's on the case, but they have a palm print that they're trying to match, and that's all she told me.
Wow.
And, yeah, and so and that's even what Kelly said. There's nobody even on the case. Nobody's even trying to investigate anything. It's like they just wrote it off. Even my dad lived in Dallas, and there was not even an article about my sister's death. There was one in Fort Worth Star-Telegram, but not in Dallas. Like one of his friends gave him a plot downtown Dallas. It's like the old cemetery, and he actually gave it to my dad for Megan. Megan's downtown. You can't miss that place. If you go to Dallas, you go downtown, Megan's right there.
Oh.
And that was kind of like, that was fishy to me. It's like, well, and now they gave my dad this plot. He said he couldn't afford the headstone. My dad didn't manage his money too good, so.
Oh.
That kind of bugged me that all this is coming back to me, and I think about it. Why would he even do that? If maybe his daughter knew anything about it or had something to do with this,
Yeah. And it seems like with the passing time and the more you find out, the more questions you have and the more things that are going through your head.
Exactly. And, I tried to block this stuff out of my memory for so long because it was real painful,
And there's no closure in a case like this. Obviously, nothing will bring your sister back, but would it help you personally a lot to know that somebody that did this was arrested and they found out who it was and they went to prison for it?
My sister, she was a sweetheart. There was no reason for it to happen. My sister was dating this guy named Ray White. He's a country and western singer. And, she told me, she says if anything ever happened to her, one of Ray Wiley Hubbard's friend would have something to do with it. And she mentioned a name, but it's been so long I couldn't remember. So I'm just grasping at straws. I don't know what happened, and I don't know why.
And you don't know why anybody would do something like that to her since she was...
Exactly. I mean, if you talk to any of her friends, she was the nicest person in the world.
Wow. Well, we see cases being solved all the time that have been, 20, 30 years old. And hopefully, somehow your sister's case could be one of those cases.
That would be awesome. I mean, that would be awesome.
Well, it's good work that you're doing. You're still trying to stay out there and be active and willing to talk to people about her case and keep her memory alive. And we'll be sure to share the Facebook page and information so people can learn more about the case. And who knows, maybe the police investigation in the case will open back up if it's not open somehow. As a murder investigation, it should be open, but I hear stories of cases that are not really being investigated. So, maybe that'll put pressure on them to open up the case.
That would be awesome, Mike. That would be awesome. I mean, because it's been so long and it's so many unanswered questions. And
well, again, I'm happy to help get the word out there and hopefully somehow, some way we hear that there's an arrest in the case.
Thank you so much, Mike. And I want my pastor to also talk to you. Just tell him thank you.
Yep.
Mike, I've known Brian for some time here at the church and counsel with him, and I wish you could see, and I know you picked it up in his voice, I wish you could see the grief that he experiences when he talks about this. I mean, you don't know Brian personally. You don't know what he looks like. He's a big man with bright blue eyes and blonde hair, and he's a hard worker. But you can just see the deep, deep hurt in his whole body and his face through his tears, through his shaking when he's talking about this. It has a profound effect on him. And you did ask him a question a while back as far as what he wanted, and And I know Brian well enough to know that he wants justice. He wants to know that the person who did this horrible crime against his sister is brought to justice, whatever justice that is. And we as believers in Jesus Christ know that no one gets away with anything. We just kind of would like to know, here and now, who did this, and the why isn't even as important as to, is this person brought to justice? Certainly you also could hear through Brian's voice the tremendous pain that he experienced after learning of her death, and then really being accused. And I know it's police protocol, to eliminate family members from the suspect list, so to speak. But, putting a family member who just learned of their dear sister's death under a polygraph is just, from this perspective, wow, what an insult, what an injury to that person to do that. And I just really feel like that was just so inappropriate, so painful. It certainly adding more insult, more salt into the wound. So Brian is still working these things out. He's made tremendous amount of progress in his recovery, and he's a fine, upstanding member of our community and of our church. And if your podcast can do anything to bring justice to his sister, to Megan, we would certainly all appreciate it. We appreciate those who seek justice. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for listening to Brian. He asked us to always sit in, and we're just moral support for him because we love him. And it's been a hard thing for him to resolve. He's seeking peace, as so many other people in the family are seeking peace. So if you can help us with that, and the Bible says, blessed are those who are peacemakers. So you'll be blessed for finding peace for Brian and for Megan.
Absolutely. That's what the goal is, to try and help in any way we can. And I appreciate you saying those words on his behalf. I think it's, to the listener, to me, you can hear the pain that's still in Brian's voice. So if there's some way we can help him with that, that's what we'd like to do.
Yeah, and I think doing this is the second time we've done it. It does stir up things, but I also know that the Lord wants to give him peace over this, and our peace is in him. And sometimes it's a journey, and I think Brian's on this journey.
Hi, Bridget, and thanks for joining us to discuss Megan's case today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
So if you can, it's a little bit of a confusing family dynamic for listeners that might be listening to this episode, but can you just walk us through the family dynamic, how you're related to Megan, how that relationship came to be?
Yes. So she and I share a dad. Our dad had been married to Megan and Brian's mom, Rosemary, who they divorced, and she subsequently passed away. And then he married my mother, who was Carol, and had me. I was born a number of years after Brian and Megan. She was 19 or 20 when I was born. So that's how that works.
So you were considerably younger than her.
Yes.
But that didn't seem to stop the fact that she really was excited to have you in her life. Tell us a little bit about when she found out, that you were coming along. Did she share any, did your family share any stories about that excitement with you?
My family didn't personally. I've heard just about everything that comes out of anyone's mouth that I talked to that knew Megan when I was in the picture has always said how excited she was to have a little sister. And I definitely felt that anytime we spent time together. I mean, she would come over to babysit me. My parents, Carol and Don, had a pool in their backyard. We'd go swimming. Every time she would come to visit, she would always bring like a little arts and crafts thing to do and little ballerina notebooks or little claymation things. Just different little creative stuff, and was just absolutely thrilled to have a little sister. So I do have all of the memories that I do have of her are all very fond, which is great.
Yeah, and was it cool for you to have a big sister?
Yes, because she was so much older, and because we never lived in the same house, I didn't really. She was more of like a big fairy godmother almost, like a big kid friend, and from a little kid's perspective, that's how I kind of viewed her. Less as, familial bonds. I think I was just too young to really understand the dynamic myself. So for me, it was just like more of like, oh, wow, here's this awesome, beautiful woman, who wants to hang out with me. That's really more how I viewed that.
Yeah, and I think we discussed a little bit before we started recording, but did you feel, maybe when you were younger, you didn't quite understand at the time, did you feel that there was something about Megan that maybe your parents just didn't quite trust 100%, and at the time you didn't know that might be that she had a problem with addiction?
Well, yes, and the only reason is because I remember specifically one night being at her apartment and really wanting to spend the night. And my mother was absolutely adamant that that was not going to happen. And I remember crying and pitching a fit and really wanting to stay, and, that just wasn't going to happen. And reflecting on that later, kind of realized why that probably was so out of the question.
Yeah, and it's
granted, at that point she'd been clean and sober for a number of years, but I didn't know any of that. So
yeah, and it's always hard to discuss that kind of stuff with kids. You can't really tell them too much that they understand. So I would take it that was maybe why they were being protective.
She, like I said, she used to babysit me when my parents still lived together over in University Park. And my mom came home early, and she was out by the pool smoking a joint. And so she wasn't. I don't think she was allowed to babysit me anymore after that. That was before she had gotten clean off drugs. So I mean,
Yeah.
So. And that was nothing that I was aware of at the time. Obviously, I was probably 2 or 3, So.
And I guess in the grand scheme of things, a joint compared to some of the other things that are a problem or is pretty minor. But I guess when you're in that world of addiction, any little thing is part of the bigger puzzle.
Sure, and I was so young, and being around a pool, and obviously, my mother not having that. So
yeah, and I know it's personal. And we talked a little bit about it too off the air that addiction, things like that, can run in families, and you opened up a little bit about some of that in your family. Are you comfortable talking about that a little bit?
Sure. I've never had a history of drug use myself personally. But alcoholism is another addiction. I do consider that completely separate from drug addiction, quite frankly, because scientifically and medically it is. But alcoholism does affect families, not just the fact that anybody that loves someone who's an alcoholic, it affects them personally and emotionally, sometimes physically, but that it also runs in families. A lot of people have considered my dad to have been an alcoholic. I'm personally one of those people that do consider him to be alcoholic. The thing with alcoholism is it's self-diagnosed. No one can tell you that you're an alcoholic. And I personally inherited that gene. I have alcoholism. I'm an alcoholic. I sought treatment for that, and I'm considered a recovered alcoholic. Now I work with alcoholic women. That's come completely full circle. And it only dawned on me like last year that Megan, who had been 5 years clean and sober from drugs, I don't know if she dealt with alcohol issues as well. I really don't know that. And spent the rest of her short life working with kids at the Promise House, that were kind of in her same situation. And then here I am dealing with alcoholism. I'm able to get a handle on that. and wrap my head around that. And now that's what I do. You know, I spend all of my time working with alcoholic women.
Oh, and congratulations on your own victory. I don't know if victory is the right word, because I guess it's an ongoing thing that you're always going to have to manage, but congratulations on moving forward and trying to put that behind you.
Thank you.
And I think in this country, in this climate we live in, especially today, addiction, whether it's drug or alcohol or whatever kind of addiction it is, it seems to, people don't realize that it does run in families, and it does cause issues within those families. And I think with your half brother, Brian, obviously he had issues, and that caused some rifts between him and your dad. And he's been on his own journey to try and get into a better situation for himself. Now, the real sad thing in all of this is it seemed as if Megan had really done an about face, and it was really making progress in her addiction. She had a great job and was living on her own when she was killed. How clear do you remember that when that happened? How did that affect you when you found out that happened to her?
Well, the first thing I did was I took the phone outside and went and called my little best girlfriend in elementary school. That's just something that I remember very clearly. It didn't register with me for quite some time. The severity of what had happened, the impact of what had happened, I don't think I knew anyone personally that personal to me that had died before. I didn't really grasp the finality of death, you know, and it took a while for that to set in. I didn't really talk about it too much because of the reactions that I got from other people, peers, kids my age. And even as I got older, if I would bring it up or if it came up in conversation, the reactions of other people really kind of stopped me from discussing it because they were so horrified. And to me, it was just, well, this is something that happened, you know, to my family. And so that cut that out pretty quick.
So you knew sort of the details that she had been murdered. It wasn't a car accident or natural causes. You knew that she had died that way.
Yes, that was not kept from me. Details and that kind of stuff were not necessarily glossed over, just kind of left to the side. I had been told that she was stabbed to death, and we didn't know who it was, and that it was in her apartment. And yes, that it was a homicide. So that was clear from the moment I was told.
And so as you grew up, at some point you decided that you wanted to know more about Megan's murder and that mystery. Tell us a little bit about how you set out to sort of learn more about it and where that brought you.
Well, sure. I started when I was able to drive. I would start to go to her gravesite at the cemetery. It's not too terribly far from my house. And a couple of years of doing that, I had been doing a study abroad in Italy. And this is kind of a strange story, but I'll tell you. And I was coming home from that trip, and I fell asleep on the plane, and I dreamed about her, which is something that, you know, I didn't think about her daily. I, didn't think about the situation regularly. It was something that was in the back of my mind. I mean, heck, I just spent, a semester in Italy. That was the farthest thing from my mind. And it was it was a vivid dream at the time, even though I have trouble recalling it now. It really struck a chord with me. And so I determined right then and there on that airplane that when I got home, I was going to just see what the deal is with that. And my goodness, it's been a number of years now, and there must have been something going on with this case. And sure enough, I got home and marched myself down to the Irving Police Department and flashed my driver's license and said, "I'm Bridget Jones, and I'm Megan John's little sister." The poor receptionist probably that was crazy. And so that's how I met Tom. he just happened to be there. Tom was the lead detective in her case, Tom Rowan. And I hadn't called ahead. I just did this kind of spur of the moment on my own time. I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I was 21, and he happened to be there that day, and he said, "Yes, come on up." And that's how I met him, and got my hands on the case files that afternoon. So.
And where did that lead you to in learning about the case? What kind of things did you find out, and what kind of answers, if any, did you find, or did it lead to more questions?
Well, it was absolutely more questions than answers. I read the autopsy report for the first time, and so that gave me a very eye-opening reality to the situation of the severity of her wounds, the multitude of defensive wounds on her hands and wrists. What's left out of the autopsy report was the facial beating that she took, which I didn't really see too much evidence of, but apparently it happened. What I chose not to do was look at the crime scene photos. I'll look at crime scene photos all day. It's kind of all over TV and stuff like that now, but I decided not to do that then, and I'm very glad that I did, because I have vivid, pictures of her in my head, and I know that those will be there as well. So I chose not to do that, and I'm glad that I didn't. What I learned is that there are a whole bunch of suspects and a whole lot of no answers. There were just lists and lists of names. And I mean, I didn't really know what to do with that information. I mean, what am I going to do? Start calling these people? No. So I just trusted the police to, do their job, basically, when it comes to that. And just kind of left it at that. I mean, really, I was just curious to see if there were any kind of breakthroughs in the case or things that they might not think to contact me to tell me about. Her parents were dead. I don't know how much Brian was in the picture at that point. And, again, I was considerably younger, just little half kid sister. I thought if anything had happened, I probably wouldn't be on the list of someone to call. So that's why I decided to go down there. And no answers, just really a realization of the severity, like I said. So, and that was the first time I understood that.
And so you didn't, it seems like you just really didn't want her case to be forgotten, and you wanted to be part of knowing what happened, knowing what the truth was.
Mm-hmm. Well, I did for, up until last year, this entire time, I had genuinely felt that I was the only person that cared about this girl, which sounds selfish, but I think part of the reason that I felt like that is because A, nothing's happened. B, I was looking at everybody, dying that's, associated with this, and feel like I'm the only one that goes and, I still go take care of her headstone at the cemetery, and thought, every time I go, it's dirty, and, I feel, well, no one cares about this girl. Everyone has forgotten about this beautiful girl. And turns out I couldn't have been more wrong. So
there's a lot of people that still think about her and still
absolutely
want to know what happened. Okay.
Absolutely. That it was a whole new world that opened up to realize that. Mm-hmm.
And where does the case stand in your eyes, in your opinion? Where does the case stand now? Is there a chance that police are going to solve it one day?
That's something that I think everybody that knows her, myself included, would love to see. That's not something that I hang my hat on. It's not something that, I necessarily need. Do I want it? Yes. Do I understand that sometimes cases aren't solved? Yes. Is it heartbreaking? Yes. But I'm not, laboring under the fact that this is absolutely going to happen. It's just not the reality for so many people. So we just might be some of those people. So I'm not very sure. I'm not sure. The fact that it's getting more attention now. And, we're coming up on 25th anniversary. And the amount of cold cases, 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50 years being solved are prevalent now. So it's not out of the question. And so the work you're doing right now, as we sit here speaking right now, I appreciate very much. I think that's fantastic. Maybe get a little bit of momentum going, maybe spark somebody's memory. I'm not sure. The way I look at it is, yes, I'm upset that someone's not sitting in prison for this, obviously. Or, this is Texas, they might get the needle and that'd be fine with me. But I do believe that whoever did this has probably been in some sort of a mental prison this entire time, because, a stabbing death is always going to be personal. You have to be up close in somebody's face to do this. You're going to get messy. You might cut yourself. The whole thing is it's a personal crime, right? And this was right up in her face. She was stabbed in the chest and in the neck. So this is a personal thing. So somebody looked into her eyes as she was dying, fighting, and I can't reconcile that hasn't haunted them. I just can't. So that's how I choose to look at that.
So you're thinking that whoever did this, whether they're alive now or not, they dealt with some serious negative memories and stuff of for what they did to her.
Well, barring a severely drug-addled mind or barring a severe mental disorder, how could it not? There are people that would not affect. But for the majority of the population, yes, that's something that would stick with you.
Well, it sounds like whether the case is solved or not, it seems like one of the things you're interested in is honoring Megan's memory. So, and I think you've done a good job of doing that, and I hope you continue to do it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And I appreciate you joining us and coming on to talk about the case from your perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you again so much for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you once again for joining me for this episode of The Murder of My Family. If you enjoyed this episode, please introduce a friend of the podcast and invite them to listen. And before you go, remember that every murder victim means something to somebody.